Hey, if your mulligan stew of rental thing pricing variables are wrecking your margins, keep listening. In today's podcast, I'm going to teach you how to take control again. Welcome to the Intentional Success Podcast, where we unpack the top strategies, explore business trends, and drill down into best practices to help your live events production business grow and scale on purpose. I'm your host, Tom Stimson. Look, we all know what a nightmare it is to manage so many pricing variables when you put together a quote. I'm going to make your life a little bit easier. I mean, you're thinking about rental day rates and multipliers and discounts and different types of labor and upcharges, and can I mark this up, and we charge extra if this is a sub-rental and there's no discount on this item. It's a ridiculous number of variables that we use in our rental-based pricing methodology. And if you can't raise your rental or labor prices without creating a firestorm of resistance from key customers and a reluctant sales team, then you have a transactional problem. And you should not be thinking transactionally. You're a valuable service business. We need to fix this. I'm going to give you one step here that's going to make your life so much easier. And trust me, it makes sense, right? So the whole idea that we're raising prices is really misnamed, okay? Price is ultimately what the customer pays, and their price is always negotiated. No one pays your list price, right? They only pay the negotiated price. And you have all these little things that you give them for free or you don't charge them as much for. You throw in as part of a package. I mean, it's a stew. I mean, it is a mishmash of things that is almost impossible to reproduce, even within the same company. I can get two salespeople in your company to quote the exact same job, and they are going to use different numbers, even though you use the same rental equipment and a lot of the same pricing. They're going to put it together differently, and they're going to come out different with a different price, especially on multiple day jobs. So the big mistake, the last big mistake, and then all the other mistakes are just going to be easy fixes. The last big mistake in pricing is the concept of duration. And duration is a rental concept. In rental think, the duration is the period of time that the customer keeps the rented car, the rented house, or the rented microphone, right? I can rent lawn equipment for as little as 4 hours. I go down to Home Depot, rent a tiller for 4 hours, or a lawnmower, or whatever it might be, a chainsaw. Okay. The rate for 24 hours or a week or a month is clearly written on the contract, but I can mow the yard in 4 hours and I can take this mower back, right? The discount is in the duration. Okay. A 24-hour rental is not 6 times 4 hours. Okay. It's barely 25% more. Sometimes it's easier to rent it for the 24-hour period in case something happens. I get a phone call. I'd have to, take a break, whatever it might be. Why not give myself a little bit more time to get that lawnmower returned? Okay. That's how rental works. The shortest period of time that you need the tools on job site, that's what you rent it for, right? If you have to keep it a little bit longer, of course you're going to pay more. Except you are not in the tool rental business, are you? Your customers never take possession of the equipment. You deliver it, you set it up, you make it work. These are your tools, right? When you bring a plumber to the house and they've got a truckload of equipment and they barely use 1/10 of it on a project, you don't take possession of that entire truck while they're working for you, okay? You say, how long is this going to take? 8 hours. Okay, well, so for the next 8 hours, I get to go root through your truck and pull tools out and find things I want to do with them. That's not how this works. That's not how anything works, right? So the idea that we're renting our tools to our customers for their use is already mislabeled. Okay? We're already going down the wrong path. So let me put it a different way. If you can arrive at the job site, set up and be show ready in 30 minutes, do a 5-minute announcement. All the employees walk in, you make the announcement, all the employees leave, you pack up, you leave. Is that job worth any less than if it was a 7-hour business meeting and you were there all day? Is it worth any less? And most of you can say, well, no, not really. Well, sometimes we charge a half-day rate on labor, right? When hopefully you stopped that 5 years ago, but maybe you still do sometimes. No, it is not worth any less. They chose to use it for 5 minutes. They had a 5-minute problem. It took the same amount of time and energy and resources for their 5-minute presentation as it would have done for an all-day presentation. That's not your problem. That's just how they chose to spend their money. There's no reason for you to charge anything less, right? So today's podcast, this all started because one of my clients, like most of my podcasts, they started because one of my clients asked me something. And he was trying to raise his out-of-date pricing on an old client who's been around a long time. And the fact that this client was actually paying pre-pandemic rates on a fairly complex 2.5-day job with audio, video, lighting, and support. And they hadn't, it's just the tip of the iceberg. Pre-pandemic pricing, seriously? So standard 2.5-day training event, set up the night before, got 2.5 days of meeting, you get to pack up, get out of there by the third afternoon. My client wanted to raise his price halfway to what his current pricing is. He had never raised prices on this client. He'd had this client for 7 or 8 years. He's never raised prices on him. He just wanted to get halfway. He wanted to get from, instead of from X to where he should have been, which is 5X, he wanted to get him to maybe 2.5X, right? It's like, wait a minute, this is a 5X gig now, and you're only charging him X. Can we get to at least maybe a 4X? Okay, never mind all that. Now, this event producer, who my client was afraid of, he's not going to hire me. No, he knew exactly what was going on here. Okay, he's been buying events all of this time. He knows that hotel rates, food costs, air travel, every other fee, every other check he wrote was higher. Okay, all of this had been rising steadily while his one AV supplier had a flat budget. And he's going, man, this is my lucky day, right? So in fact, at that time, the best price from the worst AV supplier that this end client could have hired would have still been higher than the new proposed rate. So I really felt that in spite of the fact that I wanted my guy to raise his prices even more, I thought there's more room for them. He settled it on that number, that 2.5X number. Great. Now, that buyer was going to have to take it. There's no way he was going to get that better price from anyone else. He was going to act like it was a big deal. He was going to stomp and moan. At the end of the day, he's going to come back and say, hey, what if we cut this out? This is my favorite part of the story. So the end client comes back and says, hey, how much less would it be? How much less would you have to raise my price if we cut off the last half day of the schedule, just made it a 2-day meeting instead of a 2.5-day meeting? How much less would it be? And so my guy called me and goes, hey, he's working with me. This is great. How much less should I charge him for this? And I wanted to scream and say, well, let me ask you a question. Tell me how much your costs are reduced if they cut that last bit of the meeting. How much less are you going to spend to do this job because they cut that out? He goes, okay, yeah. And he's scribbling. I could hear him on the other end of the phone writing stuff out. And guess what? The number was 0. He wasn't going to save a penny. He might get lucky if he had a local tech and he didn't have to hire him for a third day. But all of his shows were traveling jobs. All of his techs traveled. He wasn't going to save a dime. There's not a single cost he would not incur because the event was shorter by half a day. And he was in a panic because what can I tell my client? Well, it took a little bit of coaching, but I convinced him to tell him that it doesn't reduce my costs any. This is still the fee. Okay. Now, the good news is the client will probably cut the job by half a day because once he saw that how much he could save on food and beverage and room rental and all this other stuff, but he can still charge his attendees the same fee, he was going to cut the half a day. I'm not worried about that. Thankfully, the buyer agreed. The buyer took the rate. They've signed up for the next year. He's got his 5 or 6 meetings, whatever it's going to be. It's not an insignificant amount of money. This was an important lesson. However, I wanted him to charge even more because it would have been that much better of a story. But this all leads me to the lesson for today's podcast, right? And this is another of my ditching your rental mindset in 2025 tips. Okay. I want you, I'm going to use rental words, but I don't want you to think like a rental person. I want you to adopt the 1 day week. I want you to start deciding and thinking that when it comes to rental equipment, using your assets, your resources, a day is the same as a week. And bear with me here. You've thought about it, but I want to get you across that threshold. I want you to start doing this. You need to dramatically increase your price for a 1 day show. And if that means that you move from a day or a week, however you get there, the easiest way to do it in our pricing methodology is to get rid of 1 day rentals. All rentals are a week long. Okay. And you know this, that it takes the same amount of time to prep the gear, the same knowledge to spec the gear, the same talent to pull it all correctly. The cost of your labor is going to be higher on a 1 day job because it's a 1 day gig. You need overhires. They still need to be talented, but they would rather work on a multiple day job. So why wouldn't they charge you more for a 1 day job? 1 day jobs should cost customers probably twice what they're paying now, but they don't because we think like rental people. We go, oh, well, the duration. And that's why I used the story at the beginning about the 5-minute meeting. Who cares how long the meeting is? It took the same amount of cost to deliver that 5-minute announcement as it would have done an all-day sales meeting. You know this. So maybe some other things that you need to do in this. And maybe it's not just get rid of that 1 day rental and move to a week rate, whatever that number is. And maybe it's going to take a lot of massaging because some of your things don't translate from a 1 day to a week rate. Okay. It's easy. I'll talk about that in a minute, but just know that you can always use your replacement cost to figure out what your baseline pricing is. But I want to put another thought in your head. If talent is so important and talent is so hard to procure, maybe you should be charging 2 days for a show position instead of 1 day on a 1 day show. Would paying somebody 2 days to do a 1 day show increase the quality of people that were available to you? Yeah, of course it would. Now they actually have an opportunity to double dip. That's a great gamble. As a freelancer, I'd be taking those gigs all day long. I'd work 5 1 day gigs every week so that I could earn 10 times my show rate, right? So, but you need to charge for that. And why wouldn't you? Because it is absolutely worth it. The worst that could happen is you lose 1 day gigs and somebody else can take those low margin things. So, in practical terms, okay, let's be practical about this. A day is the same as a week in a rental when you're applying it to a 1 day job. This is going to give you more negotiating room because you know that sometimes on a 1 day job, you're going to have sub rentals that you can still probably negotiate a 1 day rental rate on. Not everybody is going to follow suit. And this is to your advantage, not your customers. If your customer is going, well, I can rent that for 1 day over here, you're going, well, yeah, you probably should. While they are still doing that, you should probably do that. But here's what it's going to cost for me and my talented crew to do your project based on my costs. My cost says I got to pay 2 days to get somebody on this 1 day job. I've got to secure equipment that could be on a week-long show to do a 1 day show. Therefore, my costs are the same. I've got to prep it. I've got to load it on a truck. Everything you do is the same, except for the amount of time that your show talent spends on show site, pushing the faders, hitting the buttons, right? And that's the only thing that could be less. However, if you want good talent, you've got to pay them more, right? 1 day jobs should cost a lot more than what we're charging for them. Now, remember, everybody makes money off their supply chain, right? You do not want to be the link in the supply chain that figured out last that everybody else is making more money than you are. If your suppliers are charging you a higher price today than they were charging you a year ago, compared to your net price, if your costs are higher than they were a year ago, you are already bleeding gross profit, and it's only going to get worse. Do not fall in the trap of my client who let his client keep the same pricing for 10 years because he was afraid to tell him that his costs had gone up. Your client knows your costs have gone up. They're just waiting for you to say something about it. But better yet, let's get rid of a silly, nonsensical variable in our rental heritage that has us put together complex projects on a one-day rental rate that we probably could not possibly duplicate unless we get lucky and find suppliers who haven't changed their pricing. So switching to a week rate for all of your hardware just makes sense. You can still negotiate a lower price. You can still provide discounts. You can do all the things to get to the number, but your starting point is going to make a lot more sense, and you'll have a much better understanding of where you're creating value and where you deserve to make gross profit. And that's your money. You've earned it. Thanks for listening.
If you want to find out more about today's episode, go to trstimpson.com/podcast, where you'll find the show notes, related links, and tons of other valuable resources. If you haven't already subscribed to the Intentional Success Podcast, please do so, and I'd greatly appreciate if you would rate and review the show. Also, if you think you might be a good fit to work together or want more information about the Stimson Group, I'd love to hear from you. Visit trstimson.com for more information.